Welcome to the 2019 Golden Yakkie Awards for Excellence in Unimportant Things. I am Josh Yaks, and I'll be your host on this august occasion. I hope that you will sit back and enjoy this event, which I hope will be the first in an annual tradition. The first Golden Yakkie Awards will be for the Best New to Me Board Game of 2019 and the Best New to Me Board Game Expansion of 2019. So prior to 2019, I never really had a reason to track my board game plays. Just never really saw the point of it. However, early in the year, I decided it might be fun to start a monthly video where I talked about the games that I acquired and had played during the month. And so I did begin that in March. However, that does mean that January and February are missing from this list of games, and only the last 10 months of the year are represented this time around. Hopefully next year I'll catch the entire year. But considering the year then from March through to the end of December, I acquired a total of 30 board games and 16 board game expansions. I'll put the lists of games and expansions acquired right about here and or here for you to have a look at if you like. I won't read through the entire list. What is represented here are 14 board games that are geared specifically to adults and 16 board games that are geared more towards children and family gaming. And then I have 11 expansions for adult board games and 5 expansions for kid and family games. With each of these games that I acquired in 2019, you'll see that I've indicated if I have not played it yet, and I've also indicated if I've already sold it on. Those are the special games that didn't even last a year in the house. And then during that 10 months, when I acquired those 30 games and 16 expansions, I also sold 37 of my games, which again I can put up here for you to see the specific ones. So all told, there were a few more games sold than acquired this year, which keeps my collection at a reasonable number. And then before I go on to give the actual awards, we'll also take a quick look at the list of unique games that I played throughout 2019. During those 27 months, during those 10 months, I played 27 adult games, 12 of which were new to me, 15 of which were previously played. And I played 26 primarily kid and family games. 17 of those were new to me and 9 were previously played. So it's interesting that it's almost a 50-50 split in terms of the number of adult games versus the number of kid and family games that I played that year. But the big new to me number is definitely with the kids games, and I think that tends to be because as the kids get older, they sort of grow out of their younger games and grow into more complex and interesting games. So a lot of stuff ends up getting left behind as they age into newer stuff, which obviously doesn't quite happen as an adult. So that's probably why with the adult plays, I have more plays of previously played games than new to me games. I was also thinking of breaking up this list into base game and expansion. However, I realized that a lot of my plays, whether they are new to me games or not, are with one or more expansions already added into the game. So it would be a little bit more difficult to separate expansion versus base game in this format. So I'm just sticking with the base game, whether or not expansions were added. But there's at least one instance where there's a new edition. So with Camel Up, I have the second edition, which I counted as a new to me play because I had only previously played the first edition of the game. Now, for the sake of the Golden Yakkie Awards, I'm going to focus specifically on the adult games. I was thinking of doing a children's game category, but then I realized I've just gone through an entire series with my kids of their favorite games, so I figured that would better represent the best kids games for them, rather than me trying to pick out my favorite kid and family games. With that in mind, first I will award the Golden Yakkie for Best New to Me Expansion of 2019, and there were only really 3 to choose from. So, going in reverse order, my number number 3 expansion of the year was the Golden Ages Cults and Culture. This is a game that I owned briefly. I played once. I really quite enjoyed the play. I thought the game was really neat, but it wasn't really filling that fast and super simple Civ game niche I was hoping it would fill. It ended up being a fairly long gameplay, and so I figured if I'm going to play a longer Civ game, I'm definitely going to play Clash of Cultures. I didn't feel I needed another Civ game competing for the space of a longer Civ game. Had the Golden Ages been a faster playing game, I could have definitely seen myself keeping it, because it really wasn't all that complex. It was fairly easy to play with all the proper reference material at hand. Since I only have a single play of the Golden Ages with Cults and Culture, I can't really comment specifically on that expansion because I didn't play the base game on its own. I do know that the expansion added some fun and interesting stuff to the base game though. So moving on to my runner-up expansion, I have Clank Expeditions Gold and Silk. This was an expansion for one of our favorite games of recent years, Clank, and it added a couple of new fun ways to play the game. One which focused more on the money side of the game, and one which focused more on the swords side of the game. So it added some fun things to a game we already loved. And now, the Golden Yakkie Award for the best new to me expansion of 2019 is Gloomhaven Forgotten Circles. It's an expansion for my personal #1 board game of all time. Not a huge upset that this particular expansion won out over the other two. We're only a couple of scenarios into this new campaign so far, but are quite enjoying it. We're enjoying the new character that has been offered with this expansion, as well as more of the same amazing Gloomhaven gameplay. So, congratulations to Forgotten Circles. I was originally planning on talking about my top 10 new to me games of 2019, except I realized that I've only played 12 new to me adult games in the last 10 months of the year, so I figured I might as well rank all 12 of them. Now, one of them is going to get an honorable mention rather than be included in the ranking, and that is Clank Legacy Acquisitions Incorporated. The reason I'm not putting it into the ranking is because we've only played the first scenario of this Legacy campaign game, so we've only just sort of dipped our toes in it, and I expect that over the course of 2020 we will get through the rest of the game and I'll be able to evaluate it properly once we have completed the whole thing. So that's why for now, Clank Legacy Acquisitions Incorporated is going to be an honorable mention. Now, getting into the ranked games, number 11 is the only objectively bad game I played all year, and even then I had a lot of fun playing it with a couple of friends, so the gameplay experience was still enjoyable. The game itself was definitely lackluster, and that is Heroes of Dominaria. Now, I personally know very little about the whole vast backstory of Magic the Gathering, but even I can think of some tremendously exciting games that could possibly be made with a Magic the Gathering theme around them. For instance, what about a big adventure game where each player played a planeswalker who could travel from plane to plane, solving various unique problems at each plane, leveling up their skills and abilities, and generally doing cool stuff as they bounce around the multiverse and have adventures? Or what about a couple of different ideas for one versus many games? You could have one where players played the planeswalkers in the Gatewatch, fighting, was it Nicol Bolas who they were trying to take down? One player could play the big person god thingy that they were trying to take down. The others could be the Gatewatch. Another one versus many option could be one player plays the planeswalker Liliana, and you could have 3 players playing the 3 demons she was trying to hunt down and defeat. Or you could have a 2-player game. One player could play China, trying to, as quickly as possible, get Magic the Gathering into the Chinese market, while the other player is Wizards of the Coast, who have to desperately retcon any gay relationships they had in their backstory and make sure all the characters are straight in order to avoid losing big money in the huge Chinese market. I mean, there are so many amazing options. Each individual plane could have really cool things going on. You could have the Eldrazi fighting whoever it was that defeated the Eldrazi, and each plane could have such amazing background artwork and thematic setting and all this really cool stuff. But instead, what we get is a lazily cobbled together mass market game with a magic theme slapped on it to make a bunch of money off of the name. So that was a bit disappointing game-wise. But anyways, I've talked enough about the bottom game in the ranking, and so we'll move right on to number 10, which was Istanbul, a game I had picked up from the library and played with my wife. And the game itself was decent. It just wasn't all that exciting. It was just kind of a ho-hum game in terms of how it made me feel as I was playing it. There was some interesting stuff going on, but nothing that would excite me enough to explore it more. At number 9 was a friend's game, and it was Betrayal at Baldur's Gate. Now this is one where I had in the past played a number of games of the original Betrayal at House on a Hill, so Baldur's Gate, the whole structure of the game wasn't necessarily new to me, but this particular theming was, and it was very much the same idea as Betrayal at House on the Hill, so anyone who enjoyed the first game would enjoy the Baldur's Gate version, I'm sure. And it's just one of those fun and silly experience games where you're not going in there expecting much strategy or tactics, but you're just kind of rolling some dice, drawing some cards, and seeing what happens. So in that regards, it's definitely a successful game. Now getting into the first game that I have on my shelf here, and that's number 8 with Via Nebula. This one is quite a simple and fast-playing route-connecting game. It could be a railroad-themed game, but instead they went with a bit of a fantasy theme, which is really quite charming. The game itself, though, is maybe a little too simple, a little too quick playing. I would like to have just a bit more meat on that particular game, but it's fun for what it is, and maybe I can get into it with the kids in the near future. Number 7 is Pandemic Fall of Rome. Now, I had picked up this version of Pandemic for a friend originally as a gift, and I had read the rule book to teach it to my friend and thought, this looks really cool. What a neat take on the history of Rome in a pandemic-wrapped cooperative game. And so I ended up playing it a few times, including a couple of solo plays, and thought, yeah, this really is a neat game. I really like what they've done, but it's still Pandemic, and we've played a lot of Pandemic, including complete playthroughs of Pandemic Legacy Seasons 1 and 2. So I thought, yeah, it's a great game, but I don't see myself voluntarily going out of my way to play more Pandemic, especially since I know they're continuing to work on more Pandemic Legacy Seasons, which I'm sure we'll get into. Number 6 is a game I previously mentioned when I was talking about expansions, and that is the Golden Ages with that Cults and Culture expansion. I won't go on about that one because I already mentioned it in the expansion section. I will just say that it's a good game for what it is. I wish the artwork was decent in that game and that it played quicker because it could have been a really huge hit. It was just that close, but that's all the difference that it took for me to sell it and move on. So, speaking of moving on, let's move along to number 5 now, which is Camel Up, 2nd edition. Like I said, we had previously owned and played a bunch of the 1st edition of Camel Up when I saw what they had done with the 2nd edition, both in the artwork and presentation of the game and the very small rules tweaks that they had added, which add a lot of fun to the game. I thought, yeah, I just really enjoy this one. It's, again, another game that's just a fun experience. They did a great job with the 2nd edition, and I'm happy I own it. Moving on to number 4 now, we have a 2-player game that I talked about quite a bit in 2019, which is Nagaraja. This was more or less an impulse purchase, simply knowing that it was co-designed by Bruno Catala, that it was another one of his 2-player, fairly quick, fairly simple, tactical games. And I wasn't sure if the game would be any good, but it turns out it's been a big hit with everybody I've played it with. Even after reading the rules, I wasn't entirely sure if it would end up being a decent game, but every game I've had of it has been just a lot of fun, and it's been a great tactical 2-player game. So that's Nagaraja, and now we are into the top 3, and at number 3 we have another big legacy game. This is one that we have almost completed. I believe we have one more mission to get through, and this is Aeons and Legacy. This game could have been my number 2 game on this list if it were not for the fact that the last couple of scenarios have been impossibly difficult. We started off having a lot of fun with the game. We found the missions fairly challenging. A couple we lost and had to do a second time. But then when we got to the end of the game, it was just a situation where we felt, I don't even know how we could possibly win this thing. So the overall feeling of the game dropped significantly, and I don't know how this last scenario is going to go for us, but I do still think it's a really, really well done legacy game. I just wish that we didn't feel so helpless in trying to figure out how on earth you would win those last couple of scenarios. All right, we go now from that giant game to this delightful little gem, Shadows in Kyoto. My goodness, do I love this little game. This kind of Stratego-inspired, somewhat Lord of the Rings The Confrontation-like little game of hidden movement and very tactical two-player play. The thing is, the people I've played it against, my wife and my primary gaming friend, haven't loved it nearly as much as I have, so I just am over the moon about this little game, and I have nobody who's super interested in exploring it with me. And it's a shame because it is just such a neat game. Can't say enough great things about it. And now the 2019 Golden Yakkie for the best new to me board game of 2019 goes to... I don't want to give this award to this game. I really don't. This game doesn't need any more accolades or recognition. I never wanted to play this game in the first place, let alone like it. And then when I first started playing it, I didn't even enjoy it all that much. To draw a card, play your best card, draw a card, play your best card. And then I discovered the whole world of deck building, and Magic the Gathering got its hooks into me. So now I can no longer be that snobby board gamer who can stick up his nose and say, I'm the only gamer I know who never got into collectible card games. I am not one of those fools who lets themselves get sucked into those endless money sinks. And yet, here I am, with even more knowledge as to the crazy ways in which Magic the Gathering is built to suck every penny out of players over time, non-stop and constantly, and yet also remaining aware that you don't need to sink much money into the game to play it and enjoy it, and to get countless hours of fun out of inexpensive cards. And yet, when I go into my favorite friendly local game store to look at their Magic stuff, they do have this one employee who's specifically their board game employee, a very nice fellow, a very knowledgeable board gamer, and somebody who I enjoy chatting with about games, who has a very openly hostile attitude towards Magic and Magic players, and those who do spend their money on cardboard crack, which is odd coming from a store employee, because I actually always feel a little bit awkward when I'm purchasing Magic-related items when he's around. But then that's at least inwardly the attitude I used to have. I would never give anyone trouble over it or pee on anyone's parade over the fact that they're having fun with a game. But I've had to shift my mindset a bit to recognize that people have fun in all sorts of ways with all kinds of different games, and that's the beauty of the hobby, is that there is just a vast array of options in 2019 and 2020 for anyone who wants to play games with friends and have fun. So for that, and for how much I've fallen in love with the whole concept of deck building, I must award the Golden Yakkie to Magic the Gathering. Okay, let's take a break there. I will clean up the games and we'll come back for the next category. While we're paused here, I'm going to take a second to let you know that I've gone back to my Patreon page and completely revamped it so that it is no longer an exercise in self-sabotage in which I try to convince people to not give me money. And hopefully it is a more inviting setup so that if you do wish to support me through Patreon, you can go there, check out the page, and pick a level to do so. And as always, if you're not interested in doing that, I'm very happy that you can enjoy my content free of charge. So let's get back to the awards. The next Golden Yakkies will be awarded to books. So I'm going to award one for the best work of fiction I read in 2019 and one for the best work of nonfiction that I read. Unlike with the board games, where I only started tracking my gameplays in March, I can cover the whole year when it comes to books, because basically what I did was just went through my video list. Every time I read a book, I made a video about it, so I was able to see which specific books I read throughout the entire year. Now, I was a little disappointed at the total number of books I read in 2019, because it turns out I only read 8 works of fiction and 3 works of nonfiction. It made me realize that a couple of things are really eating into my reading time, one of which is the fact that I'm spending more time painting miniatures in the evening, so that sort of directly competes with my reading time before bed. And then the other thing is just this whole YouTube channel. The number of days I spend editing for hours and hours well into the evening, it's an extremely time-consuming thing making videos, and so I'm realizing that attempting to perhaps someday finding some measure of success with YouTube is taking away a lot of my leisure and relaxation time. So yeah, not a ton of reading was done in 2019. I hope I'll be able to maybe focus a little bit more on getting some books read in 2020. But in the meantime, let's start with fiction. I mentioned I had read 8 books in the fiction category, and 7 of those books were the same series, and they were read to one of my sons. Now, of course, I'm talking about the entire Harry Potter series, and I did talk about all 7 of those books over the course of 2 videos, so if you wanted to go back and find those videos to hear my detailed thoughts, you can find those there and learn that I was largely quite disappointed with the Harry Potter series. It started off kind of on a low note for me. It rose up considerably around books 3, 4-ish, and then just nosedived for the remaining books in the series, and so overall I was quite unimpressed, which means that by default the 2019 Golden Yakkie for the best work of fiction goes to Mistborn, which is the first book of the Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. I haven't made a video about this book specifically because I'm waiting till I complete the trilogy before I talk about them as a whole. I am getting towards the end of book 2, so I've got book 3 to complete before I can get to that video. For now, I'll say it's pretty decent. It's not rocking my socks or anything, and so it's not perhaps the best book to receive an award. However, given this Harry Potter garbage, it'll have to do. Speaking of which, I encountered the exact same thing with the Harry Potter stuff in a game and toy store as I did with the Magic the Gathering thing I was talking about, where in another game store where I know the owner, again, another really nice guy, I enjoy chatting with him a lot, and when he first started to bring hobby board games into his store, I was sharing a lot of my knowledge on the hobby with him to try to help him out, but he speaks about Harry Potter in the same way that this other fellow at the other store talks about Magic the Gathering, which is odd, because obviously in his toy store he has so many Harry Potter products and toys and whatnot, and I'm sure he makes a lot of money off of it, but he speaks fairly disdainfully of the whole series, and now that I've read it, I don't necessarily speak super highly of it either, but I certainly don't give a hard time to anyone who does enjoy the books, and it's just an unusual thing for a store owner to be bashing. But anyways, just let people enjoy their hobbies. If they're not hurting anyone and they're having fun, then hey, it's fine if you don't like it. It's okay. So anyways, moving right along now to my works of nonfiction, of which there are 3. Coming in at number 3 then is a book called Medium Raw, A Bloody Valentine to the World of Food and the People Who Cook by Anthony Bourdain. This was basically a follow-up to my number 2 work of nonfiction, which was Kitchen Confidential, Adventures in the Culinary Underbelly, also by Anthony Bourdain. Again, I made a video in which I talked about both of these books together in a single video, so if you want to hear my thoughts on these 2 books in much more detail, you can look those up certainly. Kitchen Confidential I found to be fairly interesting. Wasn't as super impressed by Medium Raw. It had a few individual stories in it which were quite thought-provoking and others which were not. But R.I.P. Anthony Bourdain. And now, the Golden Yakkie for the best nonfiction book that I read in 2019 goes to Churchill's Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, The Mavericks Who Plotted Hitler's Defeat by Giles Milton. This is another one that, again, you can go back and check the video if you want to hear all the details, but it was a look at the British sort of secret agent sabotage-y stuff that was going on during the Second World War. It featured some very eccentric and interesting characters, and of course the different missions and things that they were doing were just pretty mind-blowing and installation-blowing and blowing up all kinds of different things. But it was a fun book, an interesting book, and one that certainly appealed to my interest in history and Second World War history in particular. And that covers my book awards, and we will go on to the final category as soon as I clean up the 2 books that are on the table. Alrighty then. In keeping with the masturbatory nature of the self-aggrandizing industry awards shows, my final Golden Yakkie will go to the Best Josh Yaks video of 2019. So let's talk about me for a minute. I'd like to do a couple of honorary mentions before I get to my personal top 3 favorite videos that I made in 2019. The first honorable mention that I will honorably mention is the series that I just completed with my kids, in which they went over their top 40 board games. I did those 10 at a time and just recently released their top 10 favorite board games, so it was a lot of fun to sit down with them and do that particular series. The other honorable mention is a video I made just when I hit the milestone of being on YouTube for 2 years, right around the time I was releasing my 100th video. So it was nice to celebrate a couple of big numbers, and slightly depressing to see how few subscribers I've gained during that time after all that effort. But it was a time to sort of pat myself on the back and say, "Good work, Josh Yaks, keep it up." So number 3 then is going to be a video called Josh Yaks about his top 10 favorite board games. And this is the culmination of another series that I did looking at my own top 60 board games. I put quite a lot of work into doing a 6 video series, I believe it was. Was it, or was it a 3 video series? So it was a series that I put quite a lot of work into, and it was fun to talk about my very favorite, my top 10 board games there. Number 2 is actually a callback to the books I was just talking about. This one was called Josh Yaks about Anthony Bourdain books and cooks some haute cuisine. And so I talked about the 2 Anthony Bourdain books in this particular video, but I also interspersed some rather humorous cooking demonstrations. I'm literally the world's worst cook. You should never nobody should ever listen to anything I have to say about cooking, but it was sort of fun to include that while I talked about the books. Now, sadly, that video only has 17 views as of last check, and that's maybe because it's quite a long video. I don't know if it's just one that people looked at the time on it and was like, nah, I don't really need to hear about Anthony Bourdain books for however long that video is. But that means they missed out on a couple of what I consider to be rather funny moments, and one that I definitely had some fun making. Now, the Golden Yakkie for Best Josh Yaks video of 2019 goes to a video called Josh Yaks about his number 11 through 20 favorite Joshisms. Now, the videos I've made about my favorite quotes and about my own Joshisms are some of the most fun videos I've been able to make and edit. They're short videos, they have some fun with the editing and with the settings of the videos, and it just kind of makes me happy to make those particular ones for whatever reason. That particular one only has 26 views at last check too, so again, I'm not getting a lot of eyeballs on most of my videos, to be honest with you, but it was fun for me anyways, so congratulations to me. And now it's your turn to tell me about some of your best of the year. What was your best board game of 2019? What was your best book of 2019? Who's been your favorite YouTuber to watch in recent months? I'm always interested in hearing from you, and I'm always grateful for your time that you take to watch my videos. Here's to 2020. Holy cow, you made it to the end of this video. That really does mean a lot to me. The other thing that means a lot to me is if you would give it a thumb up or subscribe to my channel, or maybe share this video with one person that you think would enjoy it. Cheers. You'll notice that with each game I've shown whether I've now for the sake of the Golden Yakkie Awards, I'm going to But since I only have a single play of Clash of Cultures, Heroes of Dominaria, previously and I thought, sounds like Subudio. I am very happy that you can, just the number of, it's not rock, because he has so many Harry Potter. So if you want to check that out, I talk in, it featured some very eccentric, it featured some very eccentric a series that I, so it was a, and I'm always grateful for your watching.